Welcome to the Birth Lounge Podcast, an empowering space for expecting and new parents to hear candid conversations with experts, support your mental health, and learn the tips and tricks that thousands of parents have used to craft their ideal birth. We will answer all of your questions, the scary ones and the weird ones, to help calm your fears and feel confident going into your birth. I'm going to help you redefine what birth and motherhood looks like and how to embrace your journey. I've intentionally crafted a list of experts to help you navigate pregnancy, explore your birth options, and plan for postpartum so that it can be a time of soaking in your tiny human. We're going to go there on all the hard topics so that you can dive deep into finding your confidence and freeing yourself from fears around birth. With over 10 years of experience in family education and a master's degree in human development and family studies, I created this podcast as a way to share the resources parents need to make educated and informed decisions about their care in pregnancy and childbirth. This is a birth community driven by evidence-based information and research in hopes to help you explore your options, understand your rights, and know what choices you have along the way when it comes to birth and beyond. I'm your host, HeHe. Now let's get to the good stuff. Tiffany, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. Really excited to be here.
Heck yeah, I'm so excited to dive into this. So I was telling you that I think a lot of us are coming to the table today really brand new coming to this conversation and not really knowing a lot about psilocybin, not really knowing a lot about its uses, about the legality, about what you might use it for, who might be appropriate for use. So I think maybe starting there is probably the best way. Can we start super basic? Let's pretend everybody that's listening is starting from the place that I'm starting from. And it's basically, I know that psilocybin is a mushroom, and I know that people take it health wise now, and it's like growing in popularity. And that's pretty much all I know. Where do we start in the conversation of psilocybin in general?
Yes, beautiful, beautiful place to start. And most people are asking those questions. What is microdosing? What is psilocybin? What is this thing that's being so talked about right now, mainstream? And I think a great place to start is just sharing what is microdosing. And so microdosing, you can microdose with a variety of different psychedelic plant medicines. The main ones that people are microdosing with right now are magic mushrooms, aka psilocybin mushrooms, and LSD. And so today I'm just going to be focusing on the psilocybin mushrooms just for reference to keep it really easy and clean and more direct focus. And so yeah, when we break down microdosing involves consuming small amounts of a psychedelic. And like I said, I'm referring to mushrooms. Usually that's anywhere between 1/10 to 1/20th of a normal psychedelic dose, usually about 5% speak. Again, that varies on a lot of things. It's very individualized. It's very much not a one-size-fits-all approach. And so that dose might be a little bit different. But the point that I'm making is when you're microdosing safely and when you're microdosing intentionally, microdosing can really offer you similar benefits that a full dose experience can offer you, but at a much more slower, gentle pace and over a longer period of time. And so the main goal with microdosing is that it's not intended to be this one day, one time experience. For microdosing to really work, it needs to be a consistent practice with usually a specific protocol, especially for those of you that are new to working with psychedelics, where essentially you're usually microdosing about 2 to 3 times a week, 30 days minimum, usually up to 90 days maximum, with that clear intention, with a clear purpose, maintaining a specific dosage amount, and usually implementing some sort of wellness modalities and ritualistic practices, being that this is a very ancient medicine that we're working with here. All of those really support the microdosing practice. And so we can get into the science and things like that later on, which is really going to paint so much more of a picture of the actual benefits that people are experiencing and why and how. But overall, I want to touch on that psilocybin is the active component in mushrooms, in microdosing mushrooms, magic mushrooms. Psilocybin also breaks down in the body as psilocin. Again, you don't really need to know that, but it's just to tell you a little bit about psilocybin. But psilocybin, when done in this specific framework, essentially, there's give or take of how you can organize and structure the framework, it can be, and it typically is, such a powerful catalyst that can really unlock transformation. It can unlock behavioral change at a neurological level, meaning that this medicine really has the power to initiate this process within you and support that internal change, which are probably a lot of the benefits that you're hearing today of just creativity and more love and compassion and more energy and helping with anxiety and depression. And for women specifically, there's a lot that's coming out with postpartum depression and PMDD and just these beautiful healing benefits that can be available for you. So I'll pause there since I know that was a lot of information. I'm sure I could see there's questions. So we'll just pause.
So many questions. Okay, I guess I would like to start. Let's back up to like it being an ancient history type medical medicine that we've used to transform ourselves as humans have existed. Talk to us about what we need to know about where this originated and who used it and why did they use it. And now I think, what does it look like in modern day use and how are we preserving some of that historical piece?
Yeah, so a lot of great questions. So origin, or from its origin speaking, it's from Mexico, and it's been in South America. And we're talking like ancient, thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago, that our ancestors and lineages that just go back and back were using this medicine. And you can even go so much so as like in the jungle in Peru, where they were utilizing these medicines for like hunting and for gathering food. And it's really fascinating that so much history is within these medicines. And the reason why these medicines are not legal is because in the 50s, they got shut down on the war on drugs. And it wasn't until recently where microdosing specifically started going more mainstream. And now a lot of people are utilizing it for all these beautiful benefits. But the truth is, like, this medicine has been around and it's not going anywhere, but it's really beautiful to see how it's now coming more to life today.
Everything's a cycle, right? And
Yeah.
sometimes we cycle through like really shitty things, but sometimes we get really cool things and we're like, yeah, no, this is when we used to use this stuff, it was really working. And why don't we bring it back? I love that. Okay, so let's start with kind of the science you're talking about. Can you tell us, I think, what that process is like? What is it doing in our body? What is the benefit? If there are any risks, definitely let us know those. And then I would love to hear more about who is appropriate based on the things that we know about what it does in our body.
Yeah, so lots of questions there. So let's start with this. Let's start with the science, because I think that's going to start to just paint a picture of, okay, how are all these benefits actually possible? What's happening in the body? Is this safe? What's going on? And the way that I like to explain it is, with all the data and all the research today, this kind of summarizes it into three kind of main areas. And so the first area when we're working with psilocybin is that it's increasing our brain's neuroplasticity. And so it's rewiring the brain, it's creating new neural pathways, which is essentially your brain's ability to reorganize and form new neural connections. And think about it, if you're in this same thought loop pattern and you're just repeating the same cycles and patterns, and usually that's very much so connected to emotional behavioral habits and perspectives and things like that. This medicine, that's one pathway that you're essentially streaming within. And this is where the new pathways come in with this medicine, where now all of a sudden there's these other pathways for those thought loops to go down. And so that's where you start to read about a lot of the benefits of healing and developing new healthier habits and changing things from a behavioral point of view, because there's these new perspectives that are coming in. Now that thought loop has options essentially to go down. So that's one way. The other way is it's decreasing your brain's fear response, which is directly connected to what's called the amygdala part of the brain. This is connected to our behavioral and our psychological responses. And so think about it when you're very stressed, or if you're feeling very anxious, or there's a lot of fear, or there's symptoms of depression. Usually that experience feels loud in the body. It feels like usually there's a body like experience, your heart is pounding, your chest, like you feel this visceral sensation, and it honestly does not feel comfortable. That part in the body and the brain, actually the decreasing starts to slow it down. And so it's not as loud, it's not as active. And there's so much productivity that can happen in the body from that place, because now all of a sudden you're able to tune into the body, you're able to get present, you're able to slow down and actually get in touch with your emotions and start to process some things as to what am I actually even feeling in my body? What's actually happening with this reaction and this response, and where is this actually stemming from? And so that's the second piece. The last piece that basically pretty much summarizes 1 and 2 together is psilocybin is it's amplifying your emotions in the body. And so amplification shows as unprocessed or unsuppressed experiences that can start to resurface. And so this can be really uncomfortable for a lot of people that aren't used to that feeling. Or if you're researching the benefits of microdosing, you're going to find joyful and creativity and more present, but you're not going to really find that you may start to experience these emotions coming up. And so this is so incredibly valuable when you can effectively process your emotions. Usually that's amazing within the exchange of a coach, mentor, a therapist, or if you are someone who really understands how to regulate your nervous system, basically the same thing. That's where you really start to put your body into this new state and allowing your body to create these new pathways that are no longer repeating those same cycles, because you're now in this new state that you've really locked and anchored into. Yeah, so I'm going to pause with that. I know there were other questions that came in with that, but that was a lot of, again, a lot of information.
No, I appreciate that. You laid it out beautifully. And as I think about I only have clients who have ever used it before. It's not like I have personal experience, and I don't have friends or family who have used it who are very close to me. And so the clients that have used it have been very open with me about their experience with it. And you described what I was hearing them say, but I didn't have the language for it. Like, I can see in everything that you said, I know it a lot from, or what our clients have used it for a lot is for trauma or anxiety, is what they have reported. And so it's just fascinating to hear what this will do for us. Okay,
Yeah.
can we talk about maybe who it's appropriate for? So who should be considering psilocybin as an option, or at least thinking about if it's maybe a thing for them?
Yeah, great question. And I'll be honest, psilocybin is pretty much for most people. And there are like some contraindications that I can share of just some obvious things. If you have a severe heart condition, or if you struggle with bipolar or schizophrenia, like just some other conditions that might not be best to microdose because of that amplification. I would say microdosing is really amazing for people that are ready to do the work, because it's not something that's just going to fix X, Y, and Z for you. It's going to require your active participation and your effort and the space created in your life to really go into this experience. And so with that, it's amazing for people where it's a resource if you're looking to get off your antidepressant medication. Obviously, there's a specific way of going about this. I have a personal story with that I'm happy to share if you want me to, but it's amazing holistic alternative option to your medications. Whether you're somebody who is looking to taper off them, this could be an amazing modality to bring in. And like I said, there's a very intentional way of going about that. And if you're somebody who's considering potentially going on medication and you're like, I really don't want to go on medication, but I don't know any other option, this is now starting to take more of that forefront, which is honestly so incredible. Anybody who is struggling, or not anybody, most people who are struggling with anxiety or depression, even addiction, ADHD, OCD, like a lot of just these symptoms where usually you're put on medication for those. Microdosing can be absolutely amazing to support with those symptoms as well. I would say anyone who is also really interested in just like finding more like fulfillment and creativity, and you're feeling stuck or you're feeling blocked and you just desire to create, like, just who doesn't want to feel inspired and fulfilled, of course, but sometimes we do all feel a little stuck and we do all feel a little lost. And so this is that beautiful little ignite that can really support you in unlocking some of those stuck points, especially based on what's happening in the brain and why that's all possible. And so really this could be anybody from a mother to a father to a CEO, an entrepreneur, having their own business. It's incredible for improving performance. And like I said, I already said creativity, but for like leaders and people that are running teams within companies, it's a complete game changer because it allows you to have more compassion, be more present with the people that you're working with, allow in these new ideas ideas. And there's so many benefits that can really come from this. But I want to really emphasize that it's not, oh, I'm gonna take this pill and I'm gonna start experiencing all these benefits. It requires the work, it requires certain frameworks for the benefits to really come alive.
Okay, I could get super woo-woo with this, especially when you were talking about unlocking pieces of yourself and your healing
Mhm.
journey. I just believe that we exist in different planes. And I think that sometimes, in order to reach our next level, not like in life, like I don't want you to think dead and come back, but just your next level of being, your next level of yourself, your next level of your higher experience. I sometimes think that we need keys. Okay, I have a lot of questions, but I want to hear your story first if you are open to sharing that.
Yeah. Yeah. I come from a very unstable, kind of broken home, and we were homeless. We were living in shelters, and I had to take responsibility at a really young age. And I ended up finding basketball, and I was really good at basketball. I got a Division I scholarship. And after that, I ended up moving to Chicago, and that's where I started my career in the medical industry. And I was in that industry for about 16 years in high executive positions in the corporate world, neuroscience, neurovascular, selling pharmaceutical prescriptions, SSRIs to doctors to prescribe to their patients. And so one day I share all this because one day I thought I was like really living the dream of what I was supposed to be living. I was climbing the corporate ladder. I was making a lot of money and I was like doing what I thought needed to be done based on XYZ. And then you take my background of survival and a young age of responsibility, and we didn't have any money. And I'm like, okay, this is it. Like, I really made it. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I personally just started to realize how anxious I was all the time and how stressed I was all the time. And honestly, depressed in a lot of ways because I hadn't gone into my trauma. I hadn't gone into the things that were really impacting my life. I didn't have the tools and the resources at that point. Although I was really driven and everything, I just didn't have the resources. And so I ended up getting put on medication because that's all I knew at the time, Adderall and Lexapro. And I was on both of those medications for about 7 years. And I just started to really tune in. There were moments where it really supported me. And I was like, okay, this is great. I feel a lot better. I was presenting and felt less anxious. And I don't know, I was just like, I know that I don't need to be on these medications. I know I just have not gone into the deeper layers. And I started to hear a little bit about psychedelics. I was working with a therapist and I was starting to get into personal development. And there were these beautiful modalities that I was learning. And there was so much healing that came from both of those experiences at that time in my life that were really serving. But I could intuitively feel that there were just layers that I hadn't accessed yet, that I still repeating itself and things were showing up in relationships. And I'm like, why is this still repeating itself? And I was like, okay, shit, there's more that I got to go into. And so 7 years ago, there was nowhere near the amount of research and data and just information in general on psychedelics as there is today. And so I was like, okay, I'm hearing about this microdosing thing. I'm hearing that maybe it can support with medication, but not enough information whatsoever. And I just had to make a decision. And I was like, you know what, I'm going to give this a try. And I just created my own regimen with it and paired it with wellness modalities and just rituals and just started putting the pieces together. And within 3 months, I was completely off both of those medications of 7 years. I didn't have any side effects. That's not to say that's everyone's experience, but it's literally 95% of the time, usually, depending on the medication. And that's a whole other thing. But it really supported me. It really supported me. And I was just starting to feel like so peaceful in my body and starting to feel just these deeper layers of things that I wanted to process that I didn't know I needed to process, that I didn't know I actually needed in general to be with. And so I just started to go deeper into the psychedelic space and knew I wanted to start to change careers. And so as I went in deeper, years and years of my own journey, education, trainings, all the things, I started to work with clients part-time and kept the job and was really scared. Like, I don't want to leave this cozy situation. Like most of us don't want to leave the cozy career. And over time, it just continue to grow and transition. And now I'm much more fully involved in the work that I'm doing now. And it's now 7 years later. So
That's amazing. Okay, I think your story is such a perfect example of how the medical model of care can oftentimes only get you so far, or it only has so many answers. And then supplementally,
Mhm.
you're going to need something else. You're going to need a functional doctor. You're going to need alternative medicine. You're going to need something more holistic. And it's not to say that those things are
Mhm.
competing, but that they can work in conjunction with one another, that where one of them doesn't have the answer or can't fill that space, the other can beautifully be there to
Mhm.
support it. I do have a question about the transition off. I have two questions actually. The first
Yeah.
one is, if psilocybin is only supposed to be meant to be used for 30 to 90 days ish, after that, if someone is not completely weaned from maybe their
Mhm.
prescription medicine, what would the options be? Do you then get back on your prescription medicine, or do you continue
Mhm.
longer psilocybin use?
Such a great question. Yeah. And I really do receive that. It's okay. I go and I'm starting to microdose. And once the 90 days is up, am I just no longer microdosing anymore? And
Totally.
think of microdosing like an ally, a tool. Think of it, if I'm feeling anxious, I want to go do breath work or I want to go meditate. It's like this modality in your toolbox that you can pull out and you can work with like just in and out throughout life. And the more that you start to get the hang of it, the less protocol structure that you kind of need, because it is a skill that you can start to learn and master. But for people that are new, I recommend following like the structure and certain days and things like that. And then it's almost like you can lean into, after time, like intuitively microdosing and just, oh, today I want to just focus on like this project and I want to microdose today. So there's ways that it can evolve and progress. As it relates to your specific question though, with like medication and microdosing and then after. So that's a little bit of a different approach in my opinion. And I support a lot of people through this process too, where usually like at the 90 days, like I would say we end up like microdosing longer. It depends. Like some people within a couple months, some people within 90 days. Like that 90 days is just a nice baseline typically to check in with yourself and see, okay, like how, like the last 90 days, what's really changed? What am I noticing that's shifted within me? What milligrams, if we're talking medication, am I now at? Because you're slowly tapering off. And your prescribing physician is also involved in that process, which I don't work with people unless they inform and get approval from the doctor who's actually prescribing the medication, because that's so important for everybody, for you especially. But if, okay, so let's say, okay, 90 days is approached, we're not off the medication, and it's okay, do I stop microdosing? No, you don't need to stop microdosing. You can continue to microdose. And you, depending on the medication, like there's the contraindication list that I can share that you can look at to see what's safe, what's not, that we can work with. But there's ways to work with it just depending on the specific individual and what the situation is. Yeah.
Got it. Okay, that's
And the
super
90 days
helpful.
also, sorry, the 90 days also, I just want to share this last piece, is usually to not build a tolerance. And so when we build a tolerance, that usually means, it doesn't mean that 90 days arrives and no longer should you microdose because it's going to create damage in the brain or it's not going to be healthy for the body. It's so good to pause, to take that inventory and then to not build the tolerance, because if you keep microdosing after that, all of a sudden with the tolerance buildup, you're going to start taking higher doses of medicine, which can eventually lead you into a different setting. And that's a whole different type of experience than the day-to-day microdosing. You can drive a car, you can go to work meetings, you're not hallucinating. Everything should be pretty normal.
Okay, you answered my second question, which is like, how does this work with your provider? And then I did want to talk about dose. So, very
Mhm.
interesting. Can you tell us about maybe what determines your dose? Of course, I guess it's like what our goals are and what you're using it for. And then is anything like height and weight and history, mental health, any of that, age, anything else considered in that?
Yeah, it's really fascinating because there's not much research on of, okay, does this depend on like weight and gender and height and all the
Okay.
specifics? And it really depends on your tolerance level and your
Hmm.
sensitivity level. So there could be, and there has been like, I haven't worked with this person specifically, but just through the industry, some people that I know worked with a certain person who was 300 pounds, a little over 300 pounds. His dose level was significantly lower than someone who was half that weight. So the weight literally, it depends on how you respond. And a great way to test that is, okay, if you drink coffee or if you're sensitive to caffeine, usually that's an indication that your sensitivity levels are going to be a little bit higher than someone who can have a couple cups of coffee and feel totally normal and not jittery and not out of body. So that's sometimes crazy coffee can make you feel.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Super helpful. What is the difference between you just saying you could drive a car and like totally function made me think, okay, function mushroom. And then I was like, wait, no, these are magic mushrooms. What's the difference between the two mushrooms
Yeah,
besides the
so
hallucinogenic?
exactly. Yeah. So functional mushrooms are the lion's mane, the reishi, the chaga, like all of those amazing mushrooms that have phenomenal benefits for the body, variety of cognitive body benefits. They are non-hallucinogenic, non-psychoactive. If you took 3 scoops of it, you might feel a little jittery, but you're certainly not hallucinating and you're not on this full-blown trip. Whereas if you took 3 scoops of mushrooms, psilocybin mushrooms, depending on the size of the scoop, you're going on a journey and you're going somewhere.
Buckle up.
So yeah, buckle up, put the seatbelt on, but don't get in a car
Yeah.
and hold on. Exactly, exactly. Strap in because you're going somewhere. And so that's the main difference is that exactly. Yeah. And
Well,
the beautiful part is, and this is just going deeper into all of this, is there's this term called stacking. And that's usually referenced with microdosing, where stacking essentially means you're bringing things into the psilocybin and such as functional mushrooms. So you can pair them. So say, usually this takes shape like in a capsule where it's all blended together. And I'll do this a lot with my clients where we bring in like lion's mane, which is phenomenal for cognitive benefits. It's phenomenal for preventing Alzheimer's and dementia. And it's amazing for focus and creativity and alertness. Basically, the stacking terminology is it enhances the microdose experience. And if you're able to hone in and refine on certain things per individual, such as if someone has really high levels of anxiety, there's certain natural herbs and certain functional mushrooms like reishi, ashwagandha that can really support with calming the nervous system. And when you blend those together, that's where you can really start to experience more of those benefits just on a subtle level such as that. Yeah. So there's ways to play with it.
cool. Naturally, my next question is I think when we talk about hallucinogens, a couple things come to mind actually. I think we all have this idea of what we see on TV, right? Like the wall is melting or the wall is like fuzzy carpet or the floor is melting or people look funny. You said it's more of a consistent dosage rather than a trip. I would love to know, what does it feel like to do
Mm.
psilocybin in this microdosing way? And I think a lot of people have probably smoked marijuana before or cannabis, so you can compare it to that. Also, I'm curious. I'll save this question. I'll save this question. Let's talk about what it feels like to actually microdose
Yeah.
throughout your day for someone who's never done it before.
Yes, yes, beautiful question. So the dose that should feel good is you feel more open, you feel more present. Maybe there's an increase in energy. It's very subtle, but it's active, or it's very subtle, but it's present, slightly active. You can microdose before working on a project or wanting to get into that creative flow, and you'll find that you're more focused, you're more in a flow state, you're more dialed in. Um, those are all good signs. I would say sometimes the colors could be like a little bright, but you're not seeing smiley faces on the trees. Hopefully that's not the experience because it would be much more than a microdose. So those are all good things to look out for. Something that you're not going to hear if you Google the benefits or read if you Google the benefits of microdosing is that I touched on it already, but feeling more of your emotions coming up. You might honestly be emotional. You might cry. You might go through some processing, and that's all beautiful. I would say there's really a high percentage of people, and I receive messages like this all the time of I stopped microdosing because I was too emotional. I didn't know I was supposed to feel this, or it felt too uncomfortable. They didn't expect that was going to be part of the experience. And it's not everyone's experience, but it's something to look out for. And I think it's a good thing. So if that's your experience, lean into it. Like lean into it because there's so much potent energy and power and just healing that can come from that. I would say on the opposite spectrum of that, what might not feel good in the body is you're going to know if it's the dosage is too high or if your body is just not responding well to it. The same thing is you may feel more anxious. You may feel like you wanted to focus on a project and all of a sudden you're just way too distracted and you can't focus. Sometimes that will show on the other side of good of the medicines. Hey, yeah, I know you want to be on the computer and everything, but we're going to actually go out in nature because you've been on the computer too much. So it'll show in these like little ways of pulling you of what might be best for you or what might be like a better suggestion for you. That's just like the funny piece of it. I would say, yeah, if you're just feeling ungrounded in your body, if you're feeling more stress and you're just feeling like, I don't feel like, you're just going to know if you don't feel good. If that's your experience, go outside, put your feet in the earth, the ground, do a little breath work, do a little meditation, eat some food, drink some water. Yeah.
Cool. Super helpful. I love hearing how functional it is, right? How you can use it in your everyday life. I think that especially mothers, women in
Mhm.
general, we think about the things that we put in our body and how it's going to affect the people around us, especially with children. So,
Mhm.
can we
Mhm.
talk a little bit about maybe using it in motherhood? I assume it's not safe in
Mhm.
pregnancy because most things
Mhm.
are not. But after the baby gets here, I have
Mhm.
seen it do good things for
Yeah.
postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety, the really hard days of postpartum. These are obviously clients who used it previously, pre-pregnancy,
Mhm.
so they knew that it worked for them. But I think that if people knew that there were other options out there, it might be something they look into. So,
Mhm.
how can we see this be used in motherhood, or how do you know that it is used in motherhood?
Mm. Yeah, so this is such a popular topic right now
Okay.
is it safe to microdose during pregnancy? Is it safe to microdose while breastfeeding?
Yep.
And the truth of it all is there's so much research that's happening right now because it's such a topic of discussion, but there's just not enough research to confidently say yes or no. And
Sure.
so what we're backing it with right now as an offering, as a suggestion, is that going back to the ancient practices that were happening with just our ancestors and what they continue to do in other parts of the country where their children are taking the medicine. They're taking the medicine while pregnant with their children. They're taking the medicine small and higher doses. And so there is that component of what can bring in like some safety in some ways. But again, it's a very different way of living. It's a very different
Mm,
culture at the same time. And so the way that I like to just offer that to people is it's really what you're comfortable with. There's been so many women that have shared their experiences, I would say less during pregnancy and more after pregnancy while breastfeeding. I would say the percentage of people microdosing during pregnancy is a little bit lower than what I hear in terms of those postpartum and breastfeeding and things along those lines. Is it's safe to breastfeed. And what the research that I've seen is it's not neurologically damaging any of the brain development with the child. And I think that's really important to share. Again, there just is not enough out there to confidently be like yes or no. But I do find that a lot of women benefit from it, especially as we're talking about postpartum depression, anxiety, especially mothers who are new to having a child and adapting to that, even fathers, and the stress that also comes with that, and the mom guilt that comes in, and just all the different elements that you're experiencing in this new transition creates a lot of stress in the body. It can create depression. It can create a lot of anxiety. And so the science of everything that I've shared today is exactly why, oh, we're like, let's, okay, we got fireworks. For those of you that don't see what's happening live, there's like a full celebration with AI in the background of my screen. That's a slip. That's hysterical.
yay
Okay.
for psilocybin!
Yeah. Coming back to Earth, coming back to the Earth plane. So that's where the benefits are really supporting these women is because of what's neurobiologically happening. Again, there's not enough research to show, okay, how's this affecting the child? But a lot of women that I've worked with have been in this experience and they found that they like really connect more with their children. It's created a lot more presence and connection with that exchange, which has been really beautiful. It creates more connection with their partner, obviously, especially with newborns, new first child. It can sometimes create a disconnect between the partners in these own ways. And so there's just been a lot of beautiful harmony that I've seen come together. Yeah, so I hope that that answers your question.
Of course it does. Yeah. Like I say, I haven't seen it but a handful of times, but the times I have seen it, it was really beautiful. And again, it was people who knew that this worked for them previously and they understood the risk and they were having conversations with their healthcare provider. And so I felt really safe and secure in what they were doing. They felt super confident and it worked.
100%.
Yeah, absolutely. And it worked so beautifully. And so for me, I was like, wow, I need to learn more about this. And also I want to spread this around as a message if this is something that is a viable option for a lot of people. I think something that comes up on everyone's mind is the legality. Is this something that is legal? Can we get this on Amazon? Do you get it from your doctor? Can we get it on
Yeah.
the internet? What does that look like in the US and like each state? Maybe not all 50 states, but what do we need to know about this?
Yeah, again, such an important question. It's here we are, we're advocating, we're talking about all these amazing
Yeah.
benefits, and it's okay. How do I get my hands on this? Talking about it, where do I get this? And so, literally, the number one question that I get. And right now, with legalities, obviously, it is an illegal substance. It's a Schedule One substance, and
Mm,
so where it is legal is in Colorado and in Seattle. Again, there's still very strict restrictions and models around what that looks like, and accessibility is honestly not the greatest. It's pretty expensive, but it's a great positive direction and where we are potentially heading. There's some states, many states where it's decriminalized, and you're seeing that pop up very often, which is, again, it's a win. It's headed in a great direction, but it doesn't mean that you can hit up Amazon on your app and get some mushrooms or go to a dispensary or go to the pharmacist. And so obviously the accessibility is a challenge. To that point, I would say there's a lot of kind of underground that happens with where you can access it and where you can order it and who can ship and things along those lines. If you have any of those specific questions, I'm happy to have you reach out to me. And I'm
yeah,
happy to.
absolutely. Hopefully, in the near future, our country can look at our schedule classes of our drugs and
Yeah, wake
properly
up a little bit.
allocate places. Yeah, we can
Yeah,
properly kind of place things along that schedule. And
exactly.
if that were to
Alcohol and
happen,
cigarettes are legal. It's like,
yeah,
hey, what's going on here?
yeah,
The whole other podcast.
all the class one drugs, they don't, not all of them make sense there. If that were to happen, what is ideal? Would we be getting psilocybin at a dispensary like we are seeing kind of the cannabis industry do? Would this be something that comes through the medical model of care? Would you be getting it from a coach or a practitioner? What would that look like ideally?
Yeah. So in my perfect world, it would be like, yeah, you can go to the pharmacist or you can see your doctor and they'll be able to treat you and prescribe this to you. And rather than getting an orange bottle with a white cap, you get this beautiful glass jar of medicine. That's like in a dream state. But honestly, the legalities and just policy, it's always changing and evolving. And to be honest, it's really the legalities with psilocybin is really focused on therapeutic clinical higher dose settings. And so it's actually not really focusing on microdosing. And so there's a huge movement right now that's focusing on supporting that getting into policy and into the legalities just as important as a therapeutic higher dose setting. But to your point is the government obviously has their hands all over this. They're seeing that this market is projected billions and billions of dollars by like 2027. So it's
Yeah.
just like pretty outrageous at this point. Everyone's hands are in the pot. So it's like you have the government, you have the therapeutic clinical pharmaceutical settings that are coming in with certain models and accessibility and making sure that they make a lot of money off those models. Then you have the guides and the coaches and the therapists and the mentors and a lot of people that are doing underground work. And then you have retreat centers where it is legal in other countries. And then you have retreat centers in the States where they're doing it underground. And so I think all of those models are going to exist in their own ways. And quite honestly, I think that they all get to exist because some people will respond really well and much more open and receptive and had a much more beautiful journey within the context of a clinical setting. There's going to be a lot more safety that they experience. They're going to gravitate more towards that type of setting, whereas other people might gravitate more towards the shaman and a retreat and being in the jungle or being at this beautiful home in a backyard in Southern California. So it really just depends on the person. And that's why at the end of the day, like everyone's hands are in the pot, but it's not a bad thing to know that there could just be more accessibility for people within these different settings. And I like that.
Yeah, I like that too. And there must be a difference in your goals and your intention and your expectation. I assume you're not going to the jungle with a shaman for 90 days. So you doing it
Yeah.
in your everyday life for 90 days is going to be a very different experience than doing something in the jungle. Can you, now you just have me curious, but can you tell us what maybe that experience, what would a higher dose at a shorter interval feel like
Mm,
in comparison to what we've described as
mm.
everyday microdosing?
Yeah, so a completely different experience. So with microdosing, like I shared, you're fully functioning in everyday life. Like I actually microdose today. I'm microdosing right now and I'm grounded. I'm normal. I think I'm normal. Am I
Yeah.
normal? So live audience, here I am. I'm microdosing and I feel great. I'm just talking, having conversation. Everything
Yeah.
feels great. And whereas if I am working with a higher dose of medicine, the setting is completely different. There's a lot more preparation that goes into it. There's, again, depending on the medicine, if we're talking ayahuasca, there's a whole diet to follow. There's a whole
Yeah.
process of elimination. But let's stick on the topic of psilocybin. So, psilocybin, there's not this restricted food diet that you have to follow, which is nice and it's more forgiving than a medicine like ayahuasca. But there are still there's a lot of preparation that goes into making sure that you're grounded and clear and as ready as you possibly can to sit with just more medicine. I also love to, for people that are new to psychedelics, to start with microdosing. So we'll work together. Usually it'll be like a 3-month experience where I guide you through a microdosing protocol. For month 1, we get to know each other, we build the trust, you connect with the medicine. And then month 2, we go into a ceremony that's facilitated. And then month 3, we go into integrating with microdosing and taking all the bigger experiences and really defining and honing and all of that. So that just paints a picture, but the higher dose is a much deeper experience into the body. You'll see more visualizations, usually bigger, deeper experiences come to the surface in
Mm.
different ways where it can show through visual graphics, it could show through imagery of some sort, it could show through actually seeing people's faces or seeing it, or it's a felt sense, an energetic felt sense in the body, or you can actually feel the sensation physically. There's different types of releases that can come with a bigger journey too: crying, sneezing, laughing, coughing, yawning. All the emotions can come to the surface. That's not to say that can't happen on a microdosing dosage, but it's a lot more elevated and enhanced with a bigger dose of medicine. And it allows you to just go a lot deeper into the deeper subconscious, the deeper suppressed emotions, deeper trauma that on every day we don't want to access. We either are avoidant and resistant, or we just don't know about it. We don't know how it's affecting us. And so it really allows you that opportunity to start to really go into it in a way that's safe. And then the actual setting. So set and setting is a big term that's used in the psychedelic space. So set is your mindset going into the experience. And
Mm.
that's where the preparation comes in, journaling before, getting clear on your intentions, grounding yourself, like things that are all very much clear for you and established for you. And then the setting part is the environment. So where you're actually at, what's the physical environment? And that space is so crucial to have set up. And usually that is, again, if it's not in the clinical therapeutic setting, if you think of like a retreat style, or I don't know, an Airbnb comes to mind, same thing, retreat, is usually there's music, there's live music, or there's a playlist that's curated with medicine music, and there's candles and there's fire and there's lights. It's like not a rave show, but it's a beautiful magical setting where you feel so safe and you feel so anchored. And the music component is such a powerful factor in the journey. And even with microdosing, the music, because of the spiritual ancient practice and just what's happening neurobiologically speaking, the music guides the journey, especially a bigger journey. It can bring you deeper into something, or it can pull you out of something. And it's just that you're much more sensitive. And so the music penetrates on a cellular level, much more present in the body.
The music is almost an accompaniment to the journey that you're on, right? It's part of that experience. It's not just in the background. And I love how intentional all of this is. You mentioned ayahuasca, and that's something I am so interested in just learning about. I just want to learn everything I can about ayahuasca. Maybe I'll do it in the future. Maybe I won't. That's not my intention
Yeah.
right now. I just want to learn about it because the things that people say, it reminds me very similarly to the things that we're saying here about psilocybin of it
Mhm.
helping them process these processed emotions and helping them surface traumas and helping them heal and truly like step into that higher being, that happier, joyous version of themselves, freer version of themselves
Mhm.
that we had mentioned earlier in the episode. Um,
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And there's a huge integration piece that comes with post ceremony as well, just to rewind. But with ayahuasca, yeah, she's the grandmother. She's the grandmother medicine. And I work with her a lot too. And very beautiful medicine in my life has been a very powerful teacher to me. And she's like a businesswoman. You're going to
yeah,
come and you're going to sit and you're going to get an agenda of all the things that you need to go do. And you're going to get a little grandma spanking energy sometimes of let's go, let's
yeah.
get it together. But it's a different type of medicine. Like I said, there's a whole diet to prepare for of elimination in certain foods. And there's a purging effect that's in the ceremony as well. That's usually not shown with psilocybin.
I was super curious about that in comparison of is that kind of physical piece that people generally talk about or a lot of times talk about present with the psilocybin at any of the doses. So even at the higher doses, we're not really expecting that.
Usually not the purging effect in terms
Yeah.
of like vomiting with
Yeah,
ayahuasca
yeah, yeah.
and not always. If you go Google a video of ayahuasca, like you're gonna see this outrageous like purging,
Yeah.
like alarming. So I don't recommend it. But the purging with ayahuasca is actually like it sounds wild, but it feels good. It's hard at times, like
Yeah.
very hard. But it's a release. It's a collection of all the shit, all the trauma, all the things that aren't serving you, all this, the fear and the anxiety and just the judgment and just all those things. It's almost like a divine. And so she's collecting through the body, moving through the body, and then it releases. And with mushrooms, with psilocybin mushrooms, yeah, open up the
I just got the
channel.
chills. Yeah. It just like, woo, came down my spine. Woo,
Literally, let your spine straight because she's coming.
seriously.
That's hilarious. Whereas with psilocybin, so think of ayahuasca, the vine, a feminine, more energetic perspective, the grandmother energy. I think of psilocybin still very masculine and feminine components, but it's think of how they're both grown from the earth. The vine is a vine, movement, feminine. Whereas the mushroom is straight, it's just a stoic, and that's more of like a masculine posture. And so I always find that to be fascinating. There's a lot of crossover with both of these medicines specifically, and they work really well together. Not, you don't want to take them in the same night,
Yeah.
but there's a lot of crossover with them that I really love. And the physical aspect with mushrooms in a higher dose is usually you're not purging in those physical ways, but there's still different purging elements, such as like sweating, hot and cold, your temperature will fluctuate, your heart rate might increase. You may feel some pain in the body that's releasing from the body, coughing, sneezing, laughing, all those types of components as well. Those are all ways of purging.
Is there, or if there is anybody who's interested in doing both, is there any
Mhm.
rhyme or reason about how to introduce them? Is there better to do one before the other, or is it based on personality? Is it based on your history?
Mhm.
Is it based on your intention, your goals? What, or
Mhm.
maybe there's nothing. You can do them anytime.
Yeah, so ayahuasca, you absolutely cannot be on any SSRI medication. So there's an MAIO component into these medicines, and it just conflicts too much with the serotonin receptors in the brain, and it can be really dangerous. And that's a big no. So you would have to begin the process of tapering off and be off 30 days minimum, depending on how long you've been on it and the medication that you're on. So that's the big difference. Whereas with psilocybin, for the most part, you can. And again, it depends on the medication and making sure that the serotonin isn't going to just be overactive, obviously. And so those are the big areas. I would say if you're new to plant medicine, psychedelics in general, ayahuasca is usually a big medicine to start with. And I don't recommend to start with that. I would recommend to start microdosing with mushrooms and then to sit in a mushroom ceremony, see how that goes. And then you can bring in some ayahuasca. Some people just go straight into ayahuasca. And again, you can take 5 grams of mushroom and you can be completely out of the ethers. And that's very deep into a process and deep into a state. Whereas You can be deep in that state with ayahuasca in a completely different way. But the point being is you're in a completely different state. And if you don't understand how to process your emotions and ground your body, it's really not effective to sit with that high amount of medicine. And so that's why I love the component of the preparation and starting with microdosing, because you start to train your body what it's like to sit with some medicine and what it's like to start bringing in these grounding modalities. Because if you go sit with a huge dose, a cup of ayahuasca, and you don't understand how to process your emotions, or you don't understand what it's like to feel in your body in certain ways, or how to breathe and be connected, it can be really damaging. It can be re-traumatizing in a lot of ways. And so that's where I really recommend starting a little bit lower and working your way into a bigger dose and then a different type of medicine.
Yeah. I think
Mhm.
being traumatized by the experience is a really large piece where of why I am just unsure if these things are for me. Because obviously, everyone's got, or the traumatic stories travel way faster than the positive ones. But I know that it's possible.
Yeah.
And I think it also is a testament to how important it is to be doing the work alongside it. You talked about going to therapy and doing the breath work and being in your body and meditating and working on your mindset and being mindful and intentional.
Mhm.
You can't really have one without the other. They're like peanut butter and jelly. Or you can, but it may impact your experience, from what I understand.
Sure. Yeah, it's such a much more powerful component to have that framework, is what I like to reference it as, is when we're working with deeper states of consciousness, whether microdosing or with a higher dose of medicine, it's different than talk therapy. We're going
Mhm.
into a slightly different state. And that brings in new layers. It's really vulnerable at times. And having somewhere to land, like having that support, especially being new, but also depending on what you're navigating and what you're working through, to have that support of that anchor point to do processing effectively, to understand and to get to the root of these layers of why things are affecting you in certain ways. And because psychedelics are amplifiers and they start to bring these things to the surface, it's so much more effective to be met in that with support. I like to think of it as too, it's like all these changes are happening like within the nervous system and the brain, and it's like functioning together on the neurobiological level. And it's okay, what do I do like with all this information and all these new experiences that are typically being presented to me? And that's where the active participation component starts to come in. That's where you get to start to do the work and be in that responsibility of, hey, I open this container and now I get to show up. And that's really where like you put your body, you give yourself the opportunity to go into this new state to create a new pathway somatically, so that you're reinstalling new healthier habits and ways of being and perspectives that you actually want to stand in, versus repeating the same cycle based on the old set of beliefs that you started with before this journey. It's, hey, I'm here, let's do the work and let's make these changes.
Okay, you're talking about some really intense things that might come up for people. Or I tend to think, all right, what if something intense comes up? Is this
Mhm.
something we're just starting on like a random Tuesday and we're like, all right, we've decided to do this. We've met with our
Yeah.
coach. We've made a plan with our doctor, if applicable. Like, all right, today's
Mhm.
the day. Or should we
Yeah.
kind of like strategically be planning, not necessarily our life around it, but maybe the first
Yeah.
couple of days or the first couple of weeks on it
Mhm.
around it? What does that look like? Integrating it into your
Yeah.
life.
Yeah. I also want to, I want to point out that this isn't, I know we're talking about a lot of like safety and we're talking
Yeah.
like the best practices here.
Yeah.
And so necessary to know. I also want to point out that not every experience, not every day that you microdose is like, you're going to be in this deep process with your emotions. Like it's
Yeah.
not, it might not be that present for you, but it is something that finds its way in throughout the experience, in and out. There's going to be days where you're not processing a damn thing and you're just like doing your thing. You're out with the nature. You're really focused. And there's going to be some days where things are coming in. And on those days, that's where you really want to create the space to be with it. And so to your point, my rule of thumb is like, when we start microdosing, the first 2 to 3 times that you microdose, have those days try to be like flexible. Don't have very high stressful meetings and things that require so much of your presence. Allow there to be some openness if possible, so that you can just feel into the experience, see how it's starting to resonate with you and in your body and just how you respond to it. And then I would say, like, usually with the way that I work with people, which I think will make sense with this, is we have set weekly sessions where you get to bring all the things that you're starting to process or that you're recognizing or noticing, and that's fully for you to integrate and receive support on what you're actually experiencing. And that is really valuable.
Yeah, that is. I think connecting with other people who've done this before or are doing it alongside you would be really beneficial too. Just
Totally.
having a community of people who are interested in this
Yeah.
journey and integrating in their lives. Okay, a question that popped into my head when you said contraindication of
Mm-hmm.
some mental health disorders. So if you have schizophrenia or you have bipolar disease, are we concerned at all about this practice bringing out those disorders or highlighting them for people who are either maybe unaware that they have them or undiagnosed?
I would say it could be a little bit of both. So I would say if you have been diagnosed, or if it runs in your family, such as some of the specifics that I shared, bipolar, schizophrenia, anything heart related condition, things along those lines, it's not recommended to even microdose. So I
Oh,
would not microdose. Yeah, I would not microdose until there's more back data and research, because of the amplifications and everything that's happening neurobiologically, especially in the brain. Sometimes it could just trigger something that you might not want to experience. The same thing is like with epilepsy,
mm,
seizures,
yeah.
same. It could just be too much of an active component in the brain, which could be unserving in a lot of ways and just unhealthy in a lot of ways. What was the second part of the question?
Are we concerned about it bringing this out in people who are undiagnosed? So I think you answered it.
Yeah, yeah, okay. I wanted to make sure I touched that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
That makes sense. That just had popped into my head when you were talking about some of the things that maybe consider don't doing it. I was like,
Yeah,
oh, wow, is that because sometimes you do get people who later in life are diagnosed with stuff, and it just makes me
yeah.
think about that.
Yeah, that's a good point because I see where you're going with that of like, okay, can it say you have no idea that you have a diagnosis and say
Totally.
you know you're not having seizures and you know you're not experiencing symptoms of bipolar and it's not from a place of like avoidance or ignorance. You just genuinely are not experiencing any of those symptoms. And maybe it comes on somehow later in life or it's in the body and you just don't know. Can psychedelics help you come to the realization
Totally.
that that's here and that's present? So I see where you're going with that. And sometimes I personally have not had the experience where I've worked with someone where that's been the outcome. I'm trying to think if I've heard about it or not. I've heard about many other factors of like disease in the body and the trauma that's connected to that disease and cancer. Like people have really been shown through bigger medicine journeys that there's cancer in the body and it's been showing as pain and numbness at times. And all of a sudden it's like they were able to connect with it being cancer, went to the doctor, and that was the truth. So it allows this like energetic kind of visibility. And a lot of that can come from a lot of things like day-to-day life. We're so busy and we're so distracted and we're not really taking that time to pause as much as maybe we should be, like the average person, or we're not really getting daily checkups at the doctor and things like that. And so we're almost accustomed to like pain and we're accustomed to anxiety and depression and we just move on with it versus really slowing down and tuning into the body and really seeing, hey, what's actually like energetically, emotionally happening, what's going on inside of me. And that's where I can totally see psychedelics allowing you to go into the body because of all the things that we've talked about today.
Totally. Okay, this is a kind of a crazy question. Was this ever used, psilocybin ever used in birth as, I guess, are there pain relieving properties to it? Could it have been used or was it ever used in ancient kind of times as a
Mm.
birth tool to help someone focus and really get into that birth flow? Not
Mhm.
to indicate that by any means women need help getting into that, but if it was a tool that was ever used, is that a thing?
Mhm. Yeah, I'm trying to think. I feel like I've heard something along the lines of this where it was utilized like more like ancient practices where it was utilized. What was it? It was like for something for birth of it was something with the child like the labor was pushed out and extended and the
Mm,
child was having a hard time actually like coming into the earth plane and it's more of an energetic component and they
totally.
were able to go in and connect spiritually and like connect in the womb with the baby. There's no research or data on any of
Fair.
this, but and I wish that there was more, but that is something that I'm going to ask around. And there's a lot of people in the space that are specifically working with like mushrooms in the womb and mushrooms
Oh,
and
nice.
there's a lot of cool, beautiful work out there. I'll touch base with some people and see if there's something that I can find because that's really fascinating. And I honest to God probably believe that it's happening really often. It's just not being talked about as much as it should be.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes sense. Birth is such an energetic and
Hmm.
multi like transcendent event. You're gonna meet new
Yeah.
versions of yourself. You're going to walk through different journeys throughout
Mhm.
that pregnancy and specifically in birth. You and your baby do have to communicate. So I could see
Yeah.
how beautifully these things could be intertwined. Okay, I think I just have one last question for you. You talked about earlier that you ideally, in an ideal world, we walk up to the pharmacist and they give you a little glass jar. So when you say that, I picture a tincture. I picture something that we're putting in
Mhm.
our mouth underneath our tongues. What are the ways that someone could consume or microdose psilocybin?
Yeah, so I highly recommend the capsules. And so if
Oh,
you can find the capsules to do the capsules because it's the full mushroom. It's the stem and it's the head of the mushroom and they're blended together. And you want the capsules mainly because it allows you to know exactly how much you're taking. Usually
hmm.
the dosage is on the bottle. If there's a bottle that comes with it, usually that's the experience. The milligrams will be on there. And usually the milligram range with the microdose will show like 150 milligrams to 250 to 300. I would say like when I work with people, like we're way even below that. Like we're talking sometimes 25 milligrams, 50
Okay.
milligrams. And so again, it just really depends on your response to it. There's not a goal of the milligram that you have to reach to be at XYZ. It's more so, hey, what feels good for me? Where were we going with that? I had a loss of thought. What was the
No.
question?
Yeah, I just wanted, what did I want to know?
I know. I was like, wait, I had it and it just like completely left.
Oh, I know. In what ways can we consume it? I had talked
Yes.
about maybe like
There you go.
chocolates or mints or tinctures or
Yeah.
anything like that. Capsules, very
Yep.
interesting. Is there any other way other than capsules?
Thank you. Yes, easy question. So capsules, yes, like I said, it allows the dosage level to be very clean and direct. Chocolates you also can take. There's gummies that you can take. A
Okay.
lot of the gummies will also have the amount within them as well. Chocolates are too, but the thing that I'm hesitant with chocolates is unless you have a tiny bar of exactly each block that has its own amount. Say you don't want to take that full amount. It's okay. Now you're just breaking a little piece off and you don't really know how much you're taking. And so I would say for people that are more new to go towards the capsules, as it's just going to be more efficient with how much you're
Mhm.
taking. And as you learn, he'll take a certain dosage amount. But yes, you can take it through the chocolate, you can take it through gummies, you can take a capsule, you can take just the mushroom itself if you also want to measure that and know what that is. You can, this is more so for not a microdose, more of like in the ceremonial setting, but you can take it as like a lemon tech, and that's with like orange juice and lemon and honey and ginger, and you let it marinate and it just basically it pulls out the psilocybin, making it stronger, where the journey ends up being like 3 to 4 hours and it comes on a little bit stronger versus coming on a little bit slower and being like 7 or 8 hours. And so that's really nice at times. So you can get some sleep and you can like continue on. Um, Another beautiful way of taking the medicine is you can also put it with cacao. So ceremonial cacao, that's really popular. That's really beautiful. Ceremonial cacao is another beautiful plant medicine. It's non-hallucinogenic, very earth-based, heart-centered, Guatemala, Peruvian, beautiful medicine. I would say if there's someone new that I'm working with, we're on a guided journey, I'm teaching them how to start, what to do. I'm like, okay, this is the dosage that you have. Here's the capsule that you have. Pour this amount in the cup of cacao. And then we're going to go into this morning ritual practice that I guide you through. And now you have this beautiful cup of medicine that you're just beginning the morning with, and you're setting your intentions and you're grounding and you're doing your thing.
I love that. Okay, and how often are we microdosing during the day? We just do it once a day in the morning, or should we do it at night? Does it matter?
So usually because it has that slight active component, again, everyone responds pretty much different to it, but usually I suggest taking it in the morning. You can take it with food, you can take it without food. If you're someone where you have, this happens with a lot of mothers, right, or fathers, where you're like so busy in the morning, there's so much going on, and you're like, I don't have time to go take 5 minutes or 10, 15 minutes to go like ground into my morning. Can I take this on the go? What do I do with this? And sometimes that's really serving to take the afternoon and microdose, or for some people, a little bit more in the evening is a lot more supportive. So it's almost taking a look at your schedule and what's going to actually be valuable. And if you're finding that if you're microdosing after 2 o'clock and you're finding that you're not able to sleep for whatever reason, okay, great, let's make adjustments. Then let's move it into the morning. I would also say sometimes like a very intentional grounding morning, although that's like the perfect microdosing type of thing to do. It's like I said, going back to the mother's piece, you're on the go at times, and sometimes that's not an option. And so sometimes I'm like, all right, take the full capsule, or go just take a minute in the bathroom and just like center yourself, just share your intentions, connect with the medicine for a moment. And if you're not putting it in a beautiful cup of coffee or cacao or matcha or whatever, you can take the capsule, and that's also going to be okay. Like, it's going to be okay.
Nice. I love it. Cool. This has
Yeah.
been so insightful. I've learned so much here. If people wanted to connect with you or learn from you or work with you, where can they connect with you?
Yes, I've had so much fun on this podcast today. I really appreciate being here. It's just been so fun. It's been so good. So yes, you can find my work. I'm really present on Instagram. So at I am Tiffany Hurd. Website is tiffanyhurd.com. And the ways that we can work together are a variety of ways we can work together through a virtual guided microdosing journey. I offer 4-week options, 12-week options. You can find the full details on my website. And then if you want to receive support with ceremony, that's also an option. And then I have a facilitator program that's out right now as well for anybody who wants to learn how to offer this work through microdosing. It includes higher dose settings, like mid to high dose settings as well. But the focus is for you to really bring it into your already existing business practice, if this is a modality that you want to share with your community, with those that you work with. So those are all on my website. And yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me.
Nice, Tiffany, truly. What an honor. Thank you so much for being here. This was the perfect intro conversations to, I was going to say psychedelics, to psilocybin mainly, but I am so glad that we touched on ayahuasca and other modalities. And I'm really glad to hear you say that these things alone aren't going to do it. You need to be doing the internal work. I love inspiring people and guiding them to think a little deeper. Think about your higher self. Think about the best version of yourself that you want to be. This may not be the tool for you. That's certainly not what I'm saying. It's not what Tiffany's
Yeah.
saying. We just want you to know that it is a tool. It's a single tool that you have access to. Some you might have access to depending on how you feel about things, but it might be an option for you. And that was the point of talking about this today. And you covered it beautifully. Thank you so much for your time and sharing your wisdom with us. I appreciate it. This was awesome.
Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate it as well. I hope this is really serving to everybody who's listening.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, you guys, I will see you in the next episode. Between now and then, go follow Tiffany on Instagram, and you can find me on all social platforms at Tranquility by HeHe. And I will see you next time. Bye, y'all.
Bye.
Thank you so much for tuning in today. I truly do value this community and I love hanging out with you. You deserve to have a birth that you love with a provider that values your autonomy and respects informed consent. It's an honor to be your go-to gal when it comes to preparing for your baby. If you found today's episode helpful, share it with a friend. Share it with someone who could use evidence-based information to help them have an informed and confident birth. I'd love to hear what you have to say and read your sweet words. By leaving us a review, you are helping other expectant mamas and their families find the podcast so that we can reduce birth trauma and improve maternity care in the U.S. one birth at a time. If you're interested in joining the Birth Lounge, go to thebirthlounge.com. If you want to connect with me on socials, you can find me at Tranquility by HeHe on all platforms. Until next time, stay educated, stay supported, stay confident. Bye!